why can two countries have access to the same planet, the same technology, and the same human potential, yet one becomes incredibly wealthy while the other remains poor?
Yeah, that is probably the single biggest mystery of the modern world.
Welcome to the Missing Lessons, where we explain what school never did.
And today we are doing a deep dive into something that literally dictates the life expectancy, the opportunities, and the daily reality for billions of people.
Exactly. We're unpacking the core mechanics behind global wealth. Trying to figure out why the wealth gap between nations hasn't closed over the last couple of centuries, but has actually gotten much wider.
Right, because, I mean, you'd think with the internet and globalization, everyone would just sort of catch up.
You really would.
Hmm.
Back in 1776, this economist, Adam Smith, published The Wealth of Nations trying to solve this exact puzzle. And honestly, the source material we're looking at today, an essay from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, it totally dismantles a lot of the assumptions we all make about why certain countries succeed.
Because I think most people, when you look at a map, you just assume it's a geographic lottery. Like, oh, they have oil or they have gold mines, so obviously they're rich.
Right, the geography assumption. But if you actually look at the real-world examples, that falls apart pretty fast. I mean, think about Switzerland or Singapore.
Oh, yeah, Singapore is a great example. It's like a tiny island.
Exactly. Historically, it was basically a swamp with a port. They have virtually no natural resources. They don't even have enough fresh water naturally. Yet today, it is one of the wealthiest nations on Earth.
While on the flip side, you have countries sitting on massive reserves of diamonds or fertile soil that are really struggling with deep systemic poverty.
So geography plays a role, sure, but the actual mechanics of why a country gets rich are behavioral. They're structural. It's a deeply human story.
Before we get into those mechanics, we should probably clarify what we actually mean when we say a country is rich.
Yeah.
Like, how are we measuring this in the deep dive?
Good point. Economists use gross domestic product, or GDP, but specifically GDP per capita. Because, if you just look at total GDP, a country with 1 billion people is always going to look richer than a country with 10 million, just because there are more hands working.
Right, so you take the total value of all the final goods and services produced in a year, and you just divide it by the population.
Exactly. It gives you a proxy for the average standard of living. And the data from 2016 in our source material highlights this massive chasm. You have the United States with a GDP per capita of around $57,000.
Wow, okay.
And then you look at a country like Liberia, and it was $455. Same year, same planet, entirely different realities.
But I have to jump in here because I think you listening might be wondering the same thing. GDP per capita is just an average, right? So doesn't that sort of hide the massive inequality inside the country?
Oh, absolutely. It's an average, so it completely smooths out the reality on the ground. You could have 10 billionaires and 1 million people living in poverty, and the average still looks great.
Yeah, like if the economic pie gets bigger, how does a higher average guarantee that the poorest people are actually getting a slice?
It doesn't guarantee a perfectly equal slice. Distribution is a huge, constant struggle everywhere. But the foundational truth of economics is that you cannot redistribute wealth that hasn't been created yet.
Oh, I see. You need the pie to actually exist first.
Right. An overall sustained rise in production, what we call economic growth, is the absolute prerequisite for lifting incomes. The essay notes that in 2013, over 10% of the global population lived on less than $1.90 a day.
That's over 700 million people on basically pocket change.
Yeah. And if a nation isn't producing more output per person, it can't escape that reality. It's just endlessly shuffling around the same small pile of resources. You need sustained growth to hit escape velocity.
Okay, so if sustained production is the goal, how does a struggling country actually hit that throttle? Like, what is the actual engine of growth?
Well, economists look at inputs first, the factors of production. You've got your natural resources, your labor force, and your capital resources. Capital meaning the tools, the factories, the physical equipment used to make stuff.
But just having lots of people and some tools isn't enough to make you Switzerland, right?
Not at all. The real secret sauce is a concept called total factor productivity, or TFP. It's not just about how much labor and capital you have, it's about how effectively your economy actually uses them.
TFP. Okay, so how does that actually look in the real world?
The source text gives this really brilliant shoe factory analogy. So imagine you're evaluating two different factories. Both have exactly 100 workers. The labor input is identical.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
In Factory A, the workers are moving materials across the floor in hand-pushed carts. They're sitting at wooden benches, assembling the shoes with manual hand tools.
Yeah, very labor intensive, probably pretty slow.
Right. Now look at Factory B. Same exact number of workers. But these workers are highly educated and trained. They're driving motorized forklifts. They're using advanced power tools, and the product is moving down an automated conveyor belt.
Oh, wow. So Factory B has vastly higher total factor productivity.
Exactly. Those same 100 people are producing exponentially more shoes in the same 8-hour shift. Because the output is higher, the factory brings in more revenue, and they can pay higher wages.
It's like it's the literal difference between working harder and working smarter.
Yeah, think of it like a kitchen. It's not just about how many people you have in chef coats, that's your labor. And it's not just about how many stainless steel ovens you bought, that's your capital.
TFP is like the recipe.
Yes, it's the recipe, the culinary techniques, the whole organizational flow. A terrible recipe actively wastes expensive ingredients. TFP is the ultimate multiplier for a nation's wealth. Education, skills, and technology make the recipe better.
So if the math is that obvious, if better tools and a better recipe equal wealth, why wouldn't the pushcart factory just buy a forklift? Like, why doesn't a poor country just upgrade its tools and catch up?
And that brings us to the most critical piece of the puzzle. The essay calls this the rules of the game. Economists call them institutions.
Institutions. Like universities or banks.
No, not physical buildings. We're talking about the structural, societal rules that dictate human incentives. Put yourself in the shoes of that factory owner in a struggling country.
Okay.
You save up your profits for 10 years to buy a fleet of motorized forklifts, but you live in a place where the local mayor can just arbitrarily seize your factory, or where organized crime can steal your equipment and the police do nothing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I wouldn't spend a dime on new equipment.
Yeah.
My incentive to take a financial risk is literally zero.
Exactly. Which is why the first core institution is secure property rights. You need the legal ability to own land, own capital, and keep the profits of your labor. Without that, investment just stops dead.
That makes total sense. If you can't keep what you build, why build it? What are the other rules of the game?
The second pillar is free and open markets. People need the freedom to buy, sell, and start businesses with minimal bureaucratic interference. If the red tape is so thick it takes 5 years to register a bakery, the market stagnates.
Right, you just give up.
Yeah.
Or you operate in the black market.
Yeah. And the third pillar is the rule of law. The law itself has to govern the nation, not the whims of individual leaders. Predictability is the lifeblood of investment.
Because if the rules can change overnight, nobody's going to risk buying a 20-year piece of machinery. Stability is basically a currency.
It really is. And we don't even have to speak about this in theory. The essay points to one of the most stunning, kind of tragic natural experiments in modern history, the Korean Peninsula.
Right, because before 1953, Korea was a single, unified nation.
Exactly. The population shared a common history, the same culture, the same geography, but then they were divided along the 38th parallel. Two entirely different sets of rules of the game were applied to the exact same demographic.
So in the North, they instituted a dictatorial communist model.
Yes. Private property rights were virtually eliminated. Free markets were repressed. The rule of law was replaced by the absolute decree of a single family.
And in the South, they eventually set up institutions that, incentivize innovation and secure property ownership.
And the resulting data is just breathtaking. Today, North Korea is deeply impoverished, often struggling with severe food insecurity. But South Korea, on the exact same peninsula, had a GDP per capita of over $27,000 in 2016.
They build our cars, they design our smartphones. It's a total economic powerhouse.
The rules of the game entirely dictated the outcome. The institutions created the wealth.
Okay, so wait. The formula seems solved then, right? Get the government out of the way, establish free markets, enforce the rule of law, and boom, you get rich.
You would think so. But here is where the data throws a massive wrench into everything we just said. The institution story is powerful, but it's not the whole picture.
Wait, really? How so?
Because history shows us that simply stepping back and letting a free market naturally develop isn't always what kickstarts a struggling economy. Sometimes heavy-handed government intervention is the initial spark.
But we literally just established that government interference destroys incentives. How do you reconcile that paradox?
Look at South Korea again. Their massive economic explosion in the 1960s didn't start under a pure free market democracy. It started under the dictatorial rule of Park Chung-hee.
Oh, really? He didn't just let the market decide what to produce.
No, he forcibly redirected the entire nation's economic focus toward export-driven industry. The really strong property rights and free markets mostly solidified later, after the industrial engine was already built.
Wow. And I think China's an even bigger example of this, right?
Massive example. China actually attempted organic market reforms during the Qing dynasty, and again in the early 20th century. Those largely failed. The real transformation, the one that turned them from a poor agrarian society into a global manufacturing titan, started in 1978 under Deng Xiaoping.
And that wasn't just hands-off capitalism. That was a massive government-led initiative to force industrialization.
Exactly. So to answer your question about the paradox, how can government intervention be the spark when it usually ruins incentives? It comes down to the difference between building an engine and driving the car.
Okay, break that down for me.
Developing basic industrial capacity is incredibly hard. You have to move millions of people from farms to cities, build deep water ports, lay down national power grids. That requires massive coordination and forced saving.
Right. An impoverished, fragmented free market doesn't just spontaneously build a national highway system from scratch.
Exactly. They lack the pooled capital. So in these cases, the government acted like a bulldozer. They cleared the land, poured the concrete foundation, and forced the initial industrialization.
And tell me if I'm tracking this right. A bulldozer can't plant a garden.
That is the perfect way to put it. The strategy you need to start industrialization is fundamentally different from the strategy you need to maintain a mature, tech-driven economy.
Because once the factories are built, top-down control becomes horribly inefficient.
Right. A central planner can force 1 million people to assemble shoes. But a central planner cannot mandate the invention of the next great smartphone or AI breakthrough.
Innovation requires organic incentives. It needs people to take personal risks.
Which is why the sustained burn of long-term prosperity ultimately depends on evolving into those core free market institutions we talked about. You need the rule of law and property rights to keep growing once the easy gains of industrialization are done.
Okay, so let's say you've done it. You've bulldozed the land, you've built the automated shoe factory, maybe with some government help, and you're transitioning to a market economy.
You're on your way.
But there's a huge missing piece here. If your citizens are still emerging from poverty, who is actually buying millions of pairs of shoes, and where did you even get the motorized forklifts for the factory in the first place? You can't just build advanced tech on day one.
And that leads us to the final absolute catalyst for national wealth, international trade.
Because you have to look outward.
Yes. The essay uses a really simple cafeteria analogy. Imagine 2 kids at a lunch table. One has a granola bar, the other has a chocolate chip cookie. They trade. And they only do it because both kids feel like they're walking away better off.
Sure, mutual benefit. But when we scale that up to whole countries, it's about way more than just wanting a variety of snacks.
It's about survival and growth. For developing nations, trade isn't just about importing cheaper consumer electronics. It's about acquiring capital goods.
Meaning the heavy machinery, the computing systems, the actual tools they need.
Exactly. When less developed countries engage in global trade, they gain the ability to purchase the advanced technology they don't have the domestic capacity to build yet.
So they're trading the basic shoes they learned how to make in exchange for better ovens and a better recipe.
They are literally importing total factor productivity. And as we established earlier, higher TFP drives economic growth, which raises the national standard of living.
But this is where politics usually gets in the way, right? Because countries are constantly putting up tariffs or trade barriers.
They do, and it's incredibly damaging. The essay drops a staggering statistic on this. Recent research suggests that if we simply removed trade barriers globally, it could close the income gap between rich and poor countries by 50%.
Wait, half? Half of the global wealth gap could be erased just by letting goods and capital flow freely.
50%. When politicians block trade, they aren't just protecting a domestic steel mill, they are actively cutting off the lifeline that struggling nations rely on to plug into the global engine of productivity.
Wow. The poorest nations are literally paying the price for those political barriers. It just shows how deeply interconnected global prosperity really is.
It really does. So let's pull all these threads together for you listening. We started with Adam Smith's 240-year-old mystery.
Right. Why are some rich and others poor?
And what we found is that a country's wealth is rarely determined by a single factor. It is usually the result of thousands of decisions, institutions, and opportunities built over generations.
It's not a geographic accident. You need sustained economic growth, driven by that total factor productivity.
You need the right institutions, property rights, and the rule of law to incentivize people to actually use that productivity.
And sometimes, you might need a government push to build the initial foundation, but you definitely need open international trade to keep leveling up.
Which leaves us with a really critical, kind of provocative thought to end on. We just explored how poorer countries rely on global trade to acquire the technology they need to catch up.
Right, importing the forklifts and the TFP.
But what happens when the next generation of capital goods isn't just a physical forklift? What happens when the new tools are incredibly advanced, proprietary artificial intelligence systems, or robotics guarded behind massive national security walls?
Oh, wow. If developing nations get priced out or are legally blocked from the next tech revolution.
Exactly. What happens to that 50% gap we just talked about? Will the divide between rich and poor countries finally start shrinking, or is it about to expand faster than Adam Smith ever could have imagined?